You know, folks, I spent over 20 years of my life playing in dive bars here in East Tennessee, Southeast Kentucky, traveling every back winding road in this part of the world. And I'd find the bar that your mom told you don't ever go in because you'll get killed. Those are the ones I'd find and go in and hang out and play my music. And I met some of the most interesting characters along the way and got some crazy stories. I could write a whole book on the crazy crap that I've seen. But I used to love going back to certain places just because of the people that was in the crowd. I'd love to pull up a stool on my break and sit and have conversations with them. And sometimes they were pretty entertaining and out there, you know. And there was this one guy in particular I used to love to go talk to just because he spoke the most incoherent ramblings you've ever heard. Nothing made sense about it, but I found it entertaining. And I'd sit on the bar stool beside of him and he would go, "Yeah, I tell you what, I went down there. I walked in, you know. You gotta be careful about that, but I did. I walked in, and people, they didn't know what to think. They looked up at me. I told them. I looked them right in the face and I told them, and they said, well, okay then. And I said, yeah. And I turned around and walked out of there because you can't just stick around like that. You know what I mean? And I'm sitting there going, I don't know what you mean. I don't know why you went down there. I don't know what you said. I don't know what happened. And I would try to kind of pull it out of him, and he'd be like, yeah, it's just messed up. I mean, that one guy, he didn't like it at all. He looked over at me. He said, I'm tired of this. And I said, well, you know, what can I say? I'm tired of it too, buddy. And I'm going, what are you tired of? I don't get it. And it got to where I would do an impression of this guy when we were traveling on the road. We'd be in the van going to the next gig, and I'd be doing an impression of that guy, and the drummer would be laughing his ass off at because I'm going, yeah, we're going to go up here. We're going to go in this bar, and people ain't going to know what to think. They're going to look at me, and they're going to say this, and I'm going to say that. And we would just sit there and have that conversation, and it became an inside joke in our band. That was some incoherent drunk on a bar stool in East Tennessee. But what I'm about to talk to you today about is, and not to get sidetracked and ramble here, is a man who wants to be the leader of the free world again. A man who is the front runner for the Republican Party is now every bit as incoherent and unhinged and off the rails as some of these people that I sat and talked to while they were drunk out of their mind on a bar stool. I'm going to play you some clips here from Trump. And I promise you, I'm flashing back to these dive bars and the drunks that I used to talk to. But here Trump says that he does something so brilliant. When he's doing his speeches, he does what he calls the weave.
You know what the weave is? I'll talk about like 9 different things and they all come back brilliantly together. And it's like, and friends of mine that are like English professors, they say, it's the most brilliant thing I've ever seen. But the fake news, you know what they say? He rambled.
So have you guys ever heard an English professor say that Donald Trump was a brilliant speaker and that he weaved all these stories together to make one big brilliant point? Who are these English professors? Where are they? I would love for him to name one. I would love to hear a reporter say, sir, you said English professors say you're brilliant. Name one. And then bring that English professor on and talk to him and see if they would say he does the weave. It's the most ridiculous thing they've ever seen. But in all these clips I'm going to show you, if you'll notice, something that stands out to me, there's always people in the background laughing. They're always laughing. And it's either because, A, they're laughing nervously because they don't understand what the hell he's saying and they're just trying to laugh to, you know, kind of acknowledge that he's there. Or B, they're laughing because they just love the fact that he gets under people's skin. I really think they get off on the fact that they know he pisses people off. And so he pisses people off that they don't like and they hate. And that's why I believe they're cheering for him. But in this next clip, he says that Kamala Harris is a defective person. And again, you'll hear the people in the background chuckling. And again, it just reminds me of the drunk on the bar stool.
A defective person. And we don't need another defective person as president of the United States. We just had that.
You know, it's a real shame what Donald Trump and MAGA did to Joe Biden's presidency. They spent the entire 4 years just running him in the ground, saying that he was slipping, saying that he was in cognitive decline, making fun of his speech, making fun of his memory, making fun of the way he walked and carried himself. They did so much that a lot of people overlooked the most effective president of our lifetime. And it's truly sad that they're the ones with the Trump derangement syndrome, by the way. They want to say that we have it, but I will always say they're the ones that have it because he couldn't just take his ball and go home, folks. He had to stick around and make everything about him. And in this next clip, he says that no one knows who Harris is. No one knows how to say Kamala. There's 20 different ways to say it. Again, just drunken ramblings.
They really know, sir. They were doing something, the man on the street, they said, you know Harris? Everyone's saying, who the hell is Harris? Nobody knows who Harris is. Once the vice president's name, they have no idea what the name is. Now, the name Kamala is, it's a little complex because there's about 19 different ways of pronouncing it, right? But Kamala is, at least it's a name you sort of remember. You can't use Harris because nobody knows who the hell Harris is. Who's Harris?
Folks, I promise you, if I walked into any dive bar in my part of the world and I said the name Harris, everybody would know who I was talking about, okay? Everyone knows who Harris is. He's absolutely just off the rails at this point, saying anything he can say and thinking that he's going to weave it together and make some sort of brilliant point. What's funny is there's idiots standing there thinking, oh yeah, he's going to get to a point, he's going to make a point. No, he's not. He's just rambling on incoherently, and we all see it for what it is. We're going to call it, and actually it's kind of an insult to rambling, because again, going back to the start of the video, I kind of found the other guy at the bar kind of entertaining when he rambled. It was pretty funny. This ain't funny at all. This is the kind of drunk that if I sat down next to him on a bar stool, I'd just get up and walk away from. Take a look.
So the Italian girl is, and the left is not a hard punch for those of you not into pugilistic affairs. But a left is just sort of a guarding punch, right? So she's fighting this person that transgendered, and the guy, boom, hits her with a left. It was like she got hit by a horse. And then she backed up, and it was weird. She's sort of like, and then he hits her with another left, and she said, that's enough, I can't take that. He ended up winning the gold medal. And there was another one who also transgendered, and he or she ended up also winning the gold medal. Yeah. Tiffany said it, I didn't. See, I'm a politician, I have to be politically correct.
Since when did Donald Trump ever care about being politically correct? His whole shtick is built on that he will just say anything, that he's unhinged and unfiltered, and will say any off-the-wall comment he wants to make, so he can go ahead and say it. I mean, we all know what he stands for. We all know who he is. The fact that he's still repeating this lie, trying to say that the boxer at the Olympics was a man, that's not true. And it's been so hilarious watching these right-wing podcasters sit back and go, yeah, but wait a minute now, hold on. If she was born a woman, but she's got higher levels of testosterone, doesn't that make her a man? I mean, these people are completely as unhinged as he is. And in this next clip, he just says the most batshit insane thing I've ever heard. And again, this is the kind of guy that I would not share a beer with.
But the transgender thing is incredible. Think of it. Your kid goes to school and comes home a few days later with an operation. The school decides what's going to happen with your child. And you know, many of these childs, 15 years later, say, what the hell happened? Who did this?
And the scary part is there's people dumb enough to believe that people are just dropping their kids off at school. They dropped the little boy off at school, and when he came home, he was a girl, and he'd had an operation, and the teachers just stepped in and did this. It's absolutely ridiculous. That's not happening on any planet, okay? That's some of the most ridiculous stuff I've ever heard, but it empowers people to just go out here and say this stuff in the break room at work, to say this stuff on a bar stool, and act as though they're the smartest person in the room. They're not. They're idiots, and we got to call them as such. This stuff isn't happening, and all they're doing is trying to stir their bigotry and hatred. And in this next clip, this is so ridiculous because he thinks Ivanka could have been a great secretary to the United Nations, but listen to what he says at the end of this clip.
And she didn't want something like the United Nations secretary. I wanted her to do that. I said, you would be a great ambassador to the United Nations secretary. There'd be nobody to compete with her. I tell you, she may be my daughter, but nobody could have competed with her rat-tat-tat, the whole deal she's got.
So when he said her and all of her rat-tat-tat, how many of y'all thought the same thing I did? How many of y'all just flashed back to that line, yeah, if she wasn't my daughter, perhaps I'd be dating her. This dude is so sick, twisted, and completely off the rails. And the idea that he thinks his children are qualified to do anything is laughable. You want to talk about DEI? Don Jr., Eric, and Ivanka, there is your DEIs. They ain't qualified to do anything, but he just looks around at the world and he says, yeah, she'd make a great secretary with all of her rat-tat-tat. And meanwhile, he will sit there and he'll criticize Kamala Harris and say that she's inexperienced and doesn't know what she's doing. And she's a defective person, and people buys into it. And then he sits here in this next clip, I promise I've only got one more. He'll sit here in this next clip and say that people are coming over here from countries that no one knows about. We've never heard of these countries. No one can speak the language. It's just so unhinged.
from countries unknown, from countries that nobody's ever even heard of, from countries where we don't even know how to speak their language, because small countries are a lot of them, many more countries than people think. Nobody in this country even knows how to speak the language, and yet those children are occupying now seats in our schools, taking them away from our citizens.
You know, folks, it's 2024. If there was a country out there that had yet to be discovered, or if people were coming here from a country that had yet to be discovered, that would be breaking news. Is he saying that the immigrants coming across the border are Christopher Columbus? Are they coming to a place they didn't realize was? Because that would be a big news story. If suddenly there was an unknown country over here that we didn't know about, they had their own language, they had their own system of government, had their own way of living, and we didn't know they were there, and they didn't know we were here, folks, I promise you that would be some massive news. And if the immigrants coming across the border from unknown places, and this was an unknown world they were coming into, don't you think somebody would go back and say, hey, there's this big place over here? Don't you think someone would have blew the lid on this by now? It's so ridiculous that this guy sits here and says this stuff and people finds it entertaining. They go, they pay money to stand there and laugh at this stuff. They find it funny. Well, going back to the start of this video, yeah, folks, there was a time in my life that I enjoyed driving these backcountry roads. I enjoyed pulling into these little old dive bars, and I enjoyed talking to these characters who just spoke so off the rails and so unhinged. It was funny in that environment. But it's not funny when you stop and think about that this guy wants to be the leader of the free world and this guy wants to be in charge of our government again with no guardrails. Yeah, I've got full immunity for official acts. I can think about all this incoherent rambling you just seen and now picture that guy behind the Oval Office desk. And if that doesn't fire you up and pump you up to vote, I don't know what will.